RFK Jr.
Brainworm. What?
Look, politics is weird, right? Hello, I'm Colin,
And I'm Charlie.
and welcome to the CNC Talks podcast, episode 15 of season 3.
Just a reminder, we release episodes every week and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It is currently Monday, May 13th, 2024 at about 8:15 p.m. Pacific time. And we got another busy week as we missed last week with some technical difficulties. Yep, those are back again. But let's get right
They're
into it.
always here. Yeah,
Yeah,
the technical difficulties never went away
nope, they
in
never do.
reality.
They never do.
Yeah, we're going to start with the governor of South Dakota, Republican Kristi Noem, who's been out with a new book now, and it is not going well for her, Charlie. There's kind of two main problems that people have pointed out with the book. The first one is that she talked very openly about shooting her dog in a gravel pit. Not great, not really what you want to do to
And
get support, especially since she was being under consideration for the vice president for on the Trump
why would
ticket.
you even put that in your book in the first place? That's like saying, hey, did you guys know in 2007 I threw a baby off a building?
Yeah, no, it's dumb. I don't understand why she put that in her book. She didn't have to put that in her book. But then the other big issue with her book, this is the one I think that she's getting possibly even more criticism for, is this lie that she told that she had met Kim Jong-un and that she had stared him down. Now, seems to not just be absolutely no evidence that she met Kim Jong-un. There is essentially confirmation now that she did not meet Kim Jong-un because the only people, it seems, that met face to face with Kim Jong-un from the U.S. delegation in either of Trump's meetings with Kim Jong-un were Trump himself and Mike Pompeo. And as far as we can tell, no, Kim Jong-un hasn't met with any other American leaders. So that's just a pretty obvious lie, and it's unclear why she would put that in her book. So she's gone on TV to promote her book and has had to defend against this. This is one of the things that's most commonly brought up, and she's used a whole variety of excuses, like, "Oh well, it was a ghost. The ghostwriter wrote my book. Okay, fine." And then she says, like, "Well, as soon as I found out that this was in the book, I asked for it to be removed, and it was. And apparently, the publisher is going to actually reprint a whole bunch of copies of the book with this part cut out. But then, the interviewer will say, like, well, so this was a lie then, and she will not admit that it's a lie. She just says, look, I'm not going to speak to my conversations with world leaders. I've traveled around the world and I've met with many world leaders, which, why? You're the governor of South Dakota. You don't actually have a role in foreign policy, especially since you're not a border state. So you just don't have a role. And she'll say, yeah, I'm not going to talk about my visits with foreign leaders. Okay, well then, why are you writing about them in your book? And the other problem is that she read the audiobook and it was in there. She read it aloud, right? That's on tape. And she can't really deny that, so she just tries to shift the conversation every time it gets to that. So, just a disastrous media tour for Kristi Noem, a disastrous book for Kristi Noem that has really ruined her reputation and credibility. She, believe it or not, was actually a very popular figure on the right. It was thought of that she had a good chance to be the vice president on, or at least on the ticket with Trump. Those chances have likely vanished. Charlie, she has now been banned by several Native American tribes from entering their reservations, which adds up to she is now banned from entering more than 20% of the state that she governs.
That's not good. And I also, real quick, want to bring up on that whole debate about the ghostwriter. This is why you proofread. If that's
Exactly.
true, this is why you proofread. And also, if you have an audiobook, that's a great time to, read the book.
Yeah, which she did, and she didn't seem to have a problem with it then. I guess she just thought she could get away with this lie, but nope, she did not, and it's causing her a lot of trouble. Kristi Noem has quickly plummeted in her approval ratings. with both Democrats and Republicans. So
Hey, we can
is
agree
this
on.
the
So
end of?
apparently, there is one bipartisan thing, and that's that shooting dogs is bad.
Yeah, I imagine this could be the end of her political career, possibly. I mean, I
It
don't see
could
where she
be.
goes from here. I mean, yeah, sure, obviously it should be. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that she's done that should have been, but apparently it's the shooting the dogs that is the deal breaker for a lot of people, which is perfectly fine, even though I feel like that deal should have been broken a long time ago.
Yeah, it seems like you can start to set up a very unfortunate joke of Christy Nome and Dr. Oz walk into a kennel
Yeah, they would get along really,
and
really
go
well,
from
wouldn't
there.
they?
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right. So
no.
let's move on now to the protests at Columbia University. And this is an unfortunate part of us missing our episode last week because this was certainly in the news quite a bit last week, wasn't it, Colin?
Yeah, I'd argue though it's still in the news, not necessarily at Columbia, but really at universities around the country. As there has just been a moment. We've obviously talked about this many, many times before, but these protests, especially at Columbia, they got kind of brutal after the mayor of New York City brought in the police at the university's request in essentially riot gear because I mean these people went inside a building and barricaded themselves in a building. We've seen stuff
Yeah.
like this at other universities. We've seen it get some not great situations at various universities, although at Columbia, it seems like few of the students actually tried to resist arrest because, they are at least slightly smart. But Charlie, I'm curious because there's been a lot of debate. Was this the right decision to bring in the police? And do you think the police handled it how they should have?
Well, my thoughts on it are obviously the right to protest is protected by the Constitution. The U.S. is one of the very few countries in the world that's allowed. But
Sure.
what isn't allowed is occupying buildings. And obviously, there's a threat of that escalating. So I think calling the police in was something that had to happen at some point. Then this was really the breaking point for Columbia. The police did come in and sweep out most of the protesters who were involved in the taking of this building. And I think in the end, it was the right call. What are your thoughts, Colin?
Yeah, I think it's complicated, right? Obviously, that is the right to protest is a First Amendment right. It is constitutionally protected, and again, like you said, breaking into buildings is not. Now, we've seen some protests that have been very effective by doing that, but as I mentioned on the show a couple weeks ago, you as a protester have to choose, and you as a movement have to choose: is this worth it to our movement? Is this actually going to help us? And right, there's been a lot of comments about, well, the focus should be on what they're protesting, not on the protest. Well, I would argue that's the job of the protesters. The most successful protests make it about the actual movement, but that's not what we've seen. The focus has been on the protesters. That is the fault of the people protesting because of the way that they've protested. It's been, in large parts, I would argue, just performative activism. But yeah, I think it was time for the police to come in this case and in several others around the country. But I will say there is such a double standard still with policing because we got way more of a reaction here than we got for something that was actually significantly more violent on January 6th. And that could be a racial issue, a political issue, and is really some of both. But either way,
It could also be
the
a lesson
difference is
learned.
clear.
It could also be a lesson learned from the events of January 6th as well.
Yes, but something tells me that if a bunch of white nationalists were occupying a building, the police would not have such a big response.
You could make that argument. I I think I'm going to disagree with that, but I have heard that argument before from other people as
Yeah.
well. Let's move
Yeah,
on
that
now.
that does not that Charlie, that does not mean though that it was not proper what they did here. It's just that again, there's a double standard. I did want to ask you real quick though, because you and Morris, our producer, actually, you went down to one of these protests at the University of Washington. You talked to some of the people there. I'm curious what you thought of it actually being there in person.
Yeah, so we were down there last Wednesday, and from a lot of the news coverage that I've seen, there has been a uptick in the amount of what's going on and the kind of intensity of what's going on over the last few days. But when we were there on
Sure.
Wednesday, we were there at about I would say 4:30 to 5. We were there for about 45 minutes, half an hour to 45 minutes, and it was
Yeah.
very peaceful. We were allowed to interview the media coordinator that they had there. I was asked a couple times by a couple people to uh, stop filming, although I did have permission and I informed them that they did keep coming back. But I mean, that's all right. That actually happened. Obviously, I understand why they're doing that. They want to make sure everyone there they're maintaining their privacy. But obviously, if you are in an encampment, camping out in a very public space, I don't know the exact laws around that. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was very.
you don't even need permission to film because it is a public space. Like to get right up in someone's face, sure, and like have them like do an interview, sure, you need their
Yeah, which
permission.
is
But
obviously
you don't
what Morris and I did to the person that we
yeah,
were in. But yeah, it
of
was very
course. But the people in the background, they can't stop you.
it was very peaceful. There was no problems at all except for that minor inconvenience that we had there. But yeah, overall, it was not the reaction that I certainly expected um, it to be, and it was relatively peaceful. It was very peaceful and relatively calm there when we were there.
Yeah, I
Obviously, as I've already established, apparently there's been more going on over the last couple days. But when I was there on Wednesday, it really was not bad.
yeah, I am curious though, because I think Morris has mentioned to me that when you guys were down there, like they didn't want you to try to interview the other people there. They only
No,
wanted
they
to go through the
anyone we
media
asked,
people.
anyone we asked sent us to the same person over and over again. And Morris and I were kind of wondering why that was. I think my thought on it anyway is that they have a particular person who for media who has a basically auto generated response, and I think part
Sure.
of the reason for that could be damage control. It could be the person this person is putting out information that makes the encampment look good. Maybe they don't want people saying things that could hurt their reputation. Obviously, people in the encampment have very different opinions with each other on various issues. They're not united in some aspects. They're very united on one specific one. But I think
Yeah.
that is likely why. And I understand from a perspective of trying to push yourself in the best light on why they would do that. But that is
Sure.
something
Sure.
you bring up a very good point.
Yeah, but you Morris also he also said that like they had some sort of tent maybe for like education on the issue of like
Yes, they had
Gaza.
a. I'm trying to remember what the exact term they used. I think it was a People's Library for Education. I believe was the term they used.
I mean, that feels somewhat problematic with also them not wanting like just the normal people who were there protesting to actually talk to the media because it seems at least to me, and maybe you disagree, but like a lot of people there, maybe even a majority, didn't even like fully understand what exactly was going on in Gaza or any of the history behind it. And I think that if that's the sense you got, that's kind of consistent with a lot of what people have been saying about
Yeah,
a lot of
no,
these
I
protests,
agree.
that they're pretty
I think
ignorant
a lot of people
of the
there.
history.
Yeah, I think a lot of people there don't actually understand the history behind it, the importance of this entire war, what other people in the encampment's opinions are, and I think that's again another reason that they had a dedicated media person is because this person, according to the general consensus of the encampment, has a good understanding of the situation. Now, whether I agree with that or not doesn't really matter, but I understand why they do that, and it makes sense.
Yeah. Now, we will talk a little bit about what they're protesting, because they did get a win of sorts in the last few days. Now, will they actually ever give Joe Biden credit for this win? Probably not, but he has paused the shipment of some bombs to Israel, given Israel's bombing in and around Rafah that has slowly begun recently. It has not been like a full out bombing yet, but Rafah is pretty clearly a red line for the administration. I think this is what a lot of people, myself included, have kind of wanted Biden to do, right? He's been publicly calling for a ceasefire, publicly calling for Israel to avoid civilian targets as much as possible, and Netanyahu has mostly just not listened. And Biden now actually finally putting some money where his mouth is and stopping more U.S. weapons from essentially being used to bomb the well over 1 million civilians that are currently sheltering in Rafah.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight the point that you made there about the fact that I don't think that Biden's going to get any of the credit for this because they're going to
No, he's
push
not.
the bar. They're going to move. They're going to change what they want. And they
Exactly.
keep doing that. And I think this is going to really end up hurting Biden in November.
Well, but my question is, can it hurt him? Because these seem to be people who, at this point, given how they keep moving the goalposts, are never going to vote for him anyway.
That's
Right?
what I
Like
mean.
essentially,
But what I
there's
mean by
nothing he
that
can
is
do to.
this group of people is not a small group of people.
Yes, but did they? Is it a group of people that even voted for him in 2020? Because
I
it
think
seems
it was.
I don't know, because it feels in a lot of ways like they attack Biden and the Democrats a lot more than they attack Trump and the Republicans. So no, I'm not saying that though they voted for Trump, nor am I saying oh they're going to vote for Trump, but in a lot of ways they seem much more on the side of Trump than they seem on the side of Biden.
Well, I agree with that, but you have to remember that in 2020, particularly on the left, there was this huge push of basically anybody that isn't Donald Trump. So I think a
I
lot of
think
the
on the
people,
mainstream left, yes, but I think that also there still was a sect that was like the never Biden on the left, and I think what Biden did in 2020 is he mostly ignored that, and it worked. And is that strategy gonna work this time? I don't know, but it seems to be a common pattern just in election years that the left just they groan about how oh well we're not going to vote for Biden essentially in or whoever the Democratic candidate is essentially in any scenario, and then if the Democrat wins without their support, they start to wonder why the left isn't, or sorry, why the Democrat, in this case Biden, isn't pandering to them anymore, and that's because essentially he doesn't need to. These people aren't, I don't think, a core part of the Biden coalition. He's built a very, very broad coalition, but I don't necessarily think these people are part of that.
yeah, and I think it's interesting that if you look from 2020 to now, just how much more extreme there is in mainstream politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shift that started well before then, but
Well, yes, but
it's
it has
certainly uh
things like COVID and January
like
6th, along with the
yeah.
war in the Middle East, has certainly accelerated that.
I mean, and even and like on the right too, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is still only a second term congresswoman, and she's now essentially the main, in a large way, like one of the most powerful people in Congress. Although we do have some news about her, Charlie. She had an effort to oust Mike Johnson. It failed miserably. Almost nobody voted for it. So this
Yeah, the
seems,
Democrats bailed out
including
Johnson.
Democrats.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Democrats
So
bailed out Mike Johnson.
to essentially be taking a significant power away from Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House, saying essentially, no, you can't just keep running this place like a circus. There's at least going to be a little bit of order here. And so that's probably good news. Democrats essentially they had to choose between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mike Johnson. They went with Mike Johnson, who has given them a little bit recently, right? Ukraine aid did pass,
Yeah,
and we'll see if it pays off for them and they get maybe a few more concessions out of him because certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't going to give them any.
yeah, and I think this is a really important, basically a strategy call from a lot of Republicans. It's this looks bad on us. If we lose another speaker, it's going to be an absolute disaster. We're going to tank in the polls, and we're going to make the worst Congress in U.S. history look
They
even
already are.
worse. Yes, look
Yeah,
even worse.
they are the worst Congress.
So let's not do this, at least for now. So let's save some face here, and let's not tank our party's chances in what is shaping up to be one of the most influential elections in U.S. history.
Yeah. Speaking of elections, Charlie, we have some elections from the UK. The local elections were a couple weeks ago, and it was a bloodbath for the Tories.
The Tories
They no
got
longer even
crushed.
hold they no longer even hold the second most councillor positions. That is now the Liberal Democrats, with Labour gaining a bunch, Liberal Democrats gaining a bunch. And Charlie, there has to be a general election in the next few months, and
Yeah,
I
and
have no clue
this
what
was
the
expected.
Tories should do.
It's over. The Tories are done.
It
I
is
mean,
looking very, very
at this
bad.
point, they might want to call it right now because at this point, I think they're just going to lose even more.
Yeah, I mean, the question though is, do they end up going with another prime minister before the elections, before the general elections?
I would say no. Generally, I think when you replace a leader in the middle of a term, it looks really bad for you.
Yeah,
I mean, like
and the Tories
look
have certainly done that a lot recently.
look at
Yeah.
the Republicans when they replaced McCarthy. Their opinions of the Congress, no matter how bad it was already, dropped significantly, and there obviously the whole chaos that followed it. So my thought is, if your polls are a disaster, you don't want to make them worse unless you're trying to build up from the very bottom. It's basically if you've fallen off the top of a mountain and have landed on the ground. Do you want to land on the ground or dig an even deeper hole to land in?
Sure. At
And if
this
I'm
point,
them, I
though,
would rather take
I
the ground.
yeah, at this point, they're struggling to stay afloat at this point, right? The general election, I think, is going to be devastating for them. I Do you think though that they are going to be the third biggest party, or do you think that they can maintain the second? They can at least stay number two in the general election.
I think they're going to do slightly better in the general election than some people think they will. I think they're going to be the second biggest party. I think it could be close, but yeah, this is just a horrible look for them. I do think they will retain second, but looking forward into the future, unless the Labor manage to absolutely mess this up in a disaster,
Which Labor does
which I
sometimes.
would not put
Yeah,
it past them. But
sure.
unless this ends in absolute disaster, the Tories are going to be on the back foot for a long time to come.
Yes, UK looking to get some new leadership, and now we turn to the biggest figure on the right in American politics, who has been spending the last few weeks in a courtroom. Charlie, we have had some blockbuster testimony in New York in the hush money payments trial. First of all, Trump was told if he violates the gag order again, he will be thrown in jail. Unclear how long he would be thrown in jail for, but the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, has said Rikers is ready for him. So, yeah, he hasn't risked violating it since then, which means that he is in fact capable of shutting up. He has though been forced to sit in the courtroom, mostly sleeping, and listen though to testimony from Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. Stormy Daniels essentially provided testimony that the alleged sexual encounter happened. It did happen. She gave some details that definitely went too far in depth,
Yeah,
and
I agree. That was not a good
could
look for her team.
so here's my thoughts on this. First of all, it's really gross. We're not going to repeat the details because I don't want to say them because
I think if we
it's
said
really
them, we would
gross.
be banned off YouTube.
That might be true. But what I think a lot of people may have had a problem with is that she implied that the sex was non-consensual. Now, it was, but the case is not about whether he raped her or not. That's not the case. And by saying that, that could be prejudicial, which means that this could be thrown out on appeal. There could be a mistrial. But I think the problem with Trump's team here is a couple things. First of all, they said in their opening argument that they were going to try to argue that the alleged sexual encounter didn't happen, which essentially means that Stormy Daniels has to give some detail to maintain her credibility, since they were trying to go after the fact that that happened. Second of all, the judge said that he wanted it to be light on details, and then the defense didn't object very much. So that it's really, really hard to argue that the jury are prejudicial comments when the defense didn't object to them at the time. So that's one problem for the defense, a pretty big problem for the defense. So it was fascinating testimony from Stormy Daniels. And then the Michael Cohen testimony. He is one of the star witnesses of this case, of course, because he was the one that actually made the payments. He had so many discussions with Donald Trump. I would argue that the proof has already been made that the hush money payments were made, that there were records that were falsified. Great. That's only part of the crime, though. Here, part of the felony crime. The other part is, was this essentially done as an attempt to influence an election? That is harder to prove. I think that the prosecution is so far probably doing a pretty good job of that so far, though. Charlie, let's move on past that to RFK Jr.
Brainworm. What?
Look, politics is weird, right? But there's some
It's
stories
not
that I
supposed to be
just
this
didn't think
weird.
I'd be saying. No, it's really not. When you're seeing headlines that are essentially like RFK Jr.'s campaign confirms that the worm that ate part of his brain will not affect his ability to serve as president, that's when it's gotten like super weird.
Okay, so
And
hang on.
yes,
I want to break that down for a second. So first of all, RFK Jr. has a worm in his brain. Second of all,
yes,
that worm is eating his brain.
yes.
And somehow the worm that is actively eating the thing that makes you make decisions and think properly will not affect his ability to be president.
Apparently. So I
Okay
the
then.
worm is dead. The worm is dead. Let's clarify that. It
Did
he
it
I think
die
it was in
because he ate too
2010.
much of his brain?
Well, no, I will. So in 2010, this first came from actually court proceedings in his divorce because he essentially said that he couldn't make as much money going forward because he was somewhat disabled because of this worm that had eaten part of his brain, but apparently not that he can't be president of the United States. But let's just forget about that part for a minute. Um, Apparently in 2010 he was experiencing short and long-term memory issues. So he went to a doctor, right? He got an MRI, right? And they found a dead worm in his brain that had been eating part of his brain. So first of all, let's just think about how just utterly insane you have to be for a worm to die from eating your brain.
Okay, how? Okay, real quick. How did the worm get there?
I don't know. It's probably in something he ate or something. I mean, like I think it was common in like pork or something in a certain part of the world or something. I don't really know. But that's not even the biggest thing. The biggest thing is, Charlie, that's not what led to his memory problem. You want to know what led to his memory problems?
Sure.
Mercury poisoning.
Can this?
Mercury
Okay,
poisoning.
I,
Yep.
I, I am convinced. I am convinced that the worm died of mercury poison in his brain, and also I'm kind of starting to think, did he just make this up to make the stupid ass decisions he's been making sound better?
No, because this all came out like I think there were medical records that were entered into evidence in court back in 2012 during his divorce proceedings, which, I mean, I don't actually know the details of his divorce proceedings, but I can imagine that it's because of the number of times that he had affairs, because, yes, it does seem to be true that he kept a sex diary where he wrote down stuff about the well over 30 affairs that he had. So, he is a Kennedy after all. Moving on, Charlie, from a person who maybe is gonna die from a worm or mercury poisoning, either one, whichever gets him first, to a person who is already dead that Republicans decided it would be a good idea to nominate for Congress. Because, yes, you heard that right, in Indiana's 7th congressional district, and district that Democrats were probably going to win anyway, Republican voters decided to vote for, in the primary, a dead person, someone that died 2 months ago.
Did the brain worm
Which
get him?
really says something. I don't know what got it, but it really says something about the Republican Party that voters would prefer a literal dead person to a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, did they know he was dead?
Must have.
Okay, then. Well, that's not the weirdest thing I've heard this week. That would probably be the brainworm, but we're gonna keep bringing
I've
this up,
never.
I
By the way,
think.
I don't think. No, I don't think that we are ever going to talk about RFK Jr. again on this podcast without bringing up the brain worm. I
Okay.
do not think it will happen. I do not think it will happen. All right, Charlie. It's time for your stat of the week.
Yep. So the NBA playoffs got underway, and then we had all of our technical problems, and we missed the entire first round. I think
Well, I think we got like the first half of it or
we got the
something.
first half, but anyway, we're halfway through round two now, and
Yeah.
there have been a couple of guys who have just gone off. Jalen Brunson has scored so many 40-point games; it's ridiculous. Anthony Edwards has done a
Yeah.
couple. So that guy, a lot of these young guys are just going crazy. It's a changing of the guard, really, in the NBA. So
Absolutely. We'll
that
get
made
to
me
that
ask.
more in a couple minutes too.
This made me ask something, and this is my question for you today. Who has the most 40-point playoff games before the age of 25? Can you get the top three?
The most 40-point playoff games before the age of 25. Are these like recent?
One of them played in the very old NBA. One of them played in kind of in the 80s and 90s, and a little bit in the 2000s, and the other one is a current active player.
Does Jordan have one?
Jordan has the most with 38.
That's a lot. Does LeBron must have one, right?
LeBron's in
He
second
played
with
for so long
29.
before 25. And someone from, you said, like, what era? The 70s or something?
I
60s?
think so. I'm gonna sound really stupid if I'm wrong.
Wilt?
No.
Bill Russell.
No. Right. By the way, when you said no, but you're getting closer. You played for the Lakers.
Kareem?
Nah, it's Jerry West at 20.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
He
then after
wasn't.
that, it's Durant and Elgin Baylor, both with 14. Kobe with 13. Wilt with 12. Shaq with 12. And then Harden, Olajuwon, Iverson. And at that point, we're in less than 10. And the lowest of this list goes is Murray, Mitchell, and Leonard, who all have 5.
Like, wait, Jamal Murray and Donovan
Yes.
Mitchell?
Yep.
Okay.
Jamal Murray,
All right.
Donovan Mitchell, and Kawhi Leonard.
All right.
Brunson
Speaking of
has
that, let's
6
get
all in this playoff.
let's get to these NBA playoffs as we move on to sports. We'll start with just the end of the first round, Charlie. That 76ers Knicks series was one of the best first round series I've seen in quite a few years.
Yeah, I mean, 76ers kept it close every single game, took the lead. I think the series would have been very different if Joel was fully healthy, but Knicks get it done in 6. They move on to face the winner of Indiana and Milwaukee, which ends up being Indiana. They take down Milwaukee. What a disaster for Giannis and Dame. Speaking of disasters, what happened to the Clippers?
They're the Clippers.
So
They do their
here's
thing
a
in the
question for you,
playoffs.
Colin. Which game was, in your opinion, which team was a bigger disappointment this season? Phoenix, Milwaukee, or LA? The Clippers.
I think Phoenix has to be the ultimate disappointment here.
That core is
For
done.
amount of star power. That core's done, and they fired Frank Vogel too, as we said they should. But Charlie, hiring Mike Budenholzer, this is an interesting decision, and I don't mean that in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not a good idea. I don't get why they did that, really, at all. But just some other series I think we talked about last time. OKC gets past New Orleans. Minnesota.
Yeah.
Minnesota gets past at Phoenix. They swept and they demolished them.
Yes, they did.
Denver gets through no problem, as well as Dallas takes down the Clippers. And out east, that 4-5 matchup between the Cavs and Magic goes 7. Banchero gives it everything he has, but Donovan Mitchell's too much. Cavs pull it out in 7. Boston deals with Miami, no problem. Not gonna have what happened last year happen again with the 8 seed Heat taking down the 1 seed. As we said, the Knicks deal with the Sixers. Sixers were very unfortunate to be a 7 seed. Obviously, very different.
Yeah,
as I said, if Embiid does not go down, Pacers finish off the Bucks and sets up round 2. OKC and Dallas currently, I believe that series is tied at 2. Game 5 is going on right now as we speak.
No, game 4, Dallas is up 2-1.
I'm sorry, game 4. You are right.
82-75 as we're recording this. Please, Dallas, get Oklahoma City out of there. Signed, a person from Seattle.
Yep.
Charlie,
that Denver Minnesota series tied at 2-2. Both teams taking both games on the road.
Yeah, it's a fun series. Not as fun though, Charlie, as the Knicks Pacers series.
What this series, as soon as it got back to Indiana, just turned. The Knicks are out of gas. The Pacers bench is on fire. Is this series over?
I don't think I'd say it's over, but I would definitely take the Pacers at this point with the health concerns of
two historic rivals, I'll tell you that.
Tyrese Halliburton, sure. Although Reggie Miller in Madison Square Garden calling game 2 was just a disaster. But no, I think that this series, I still think we're in for a good last few games of the series. I mean, in the best series, like most really quality series have a blowout in each direction at some point. We haven't seen the Knicks blowout the Pacers yet, but it could still happen.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacers just ran away with Game 4. I flicked on my TV halfway through I flicked on my TV halfway through the third quarter, and they were up by 40. Indy was beaten by 40.
It was a blowout from the first minute to the 48th minute. Truly.
That was an absolute disaster, and I think momentum is all Indiana.
Absolutely. I don't think we have a ton to say about the Celtics-Cavs series. The Celtics are doing what we expected.
Celtics are going to win. Celtics are going to win. That Magic Cavs series was just to determine who gets fed to Boston. But Boston loves dropping games for some reason.
Yeah, they have
I have
not
no,
seemed
I
to
have
me
no
watching
faith in the
this series like
Celtics.
a team that can. No, I don't think that they're a team that can win the NBA Finals.
I,
They
I,
just didn't look like it.
I really think that we're really boiling down to all the teams in the West are absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I'd agree. Now,
If the
before
Knicks are
we,
fully healthy, they're very good. And if you let the
yep.
Pacers bench do anything, they will demolish you.
Yeah, I think there's two more NBA things that we have to talk about before we move on to the NHL. The first one, Charlie, is Patrick Beverley, obviously throwing the ball at the fan and then refusing to answer the question from the female reporter because she didn't subscribe to his podcast. What do you think about Pat Bev?
I mean, it's Pat Bev. It sounds something like something he'd do.
Yeah, I think that Nick Wright of First Things First on FS1 summed it up just about as well as anyone could. He's, if not for his personality, which is ugly, which is and it's the only thing that actually gets any attention about him, he's an absolute nobody. He has done nothing. He's never gone anywhere in the playoffs except when he's been sat on the bench, except for that time when he won what he thought was the NBA Finals, except it was actually just a play-in game against the team that gave up on him. Oh, wait, literally every single team that he has ever been on has given up on him because he's an absolutely garbage player. At least when Draymond Green has his issues,
in
he
2020?
wins. Did what?
Was he on that 2020 Lakers team, or did he get there the next
No,
year?
he was on the 2020 Clippers team. That
yep,
one?
yep, you're right.
Yeah, that one. That's the team that he was on. So he's done nothing. Like again, Draymond Green, same kind of attitude problems. At least he backs it up well with wins and with good play because he's actually a good player. Patrick Beverley is a wannabe Draymond Green, and he has everything he needs to do it except the actual skills on the court, and that's a pretty important part.
Yeah. No matter what you say about Draymond, he can play. Patrick Beverley just can't.
Yeah. One other NBA thing that I think we got to touch on is the draft lottery, Charlie. Your Hornets, I still don't know why you root for the Hornets, but regardless, they got the 6th pick. The Atlanta Hawks and the Shocker got the 1st pick.
Colin, I will tell you this: at least we're not the Pistons.
Yeah, I was about to say the Pistons.
I'm so sorry, Detroit.
For the second straight year, dropped from 1 to 5. Charlie, you said to me before, at least we'll never finish last in the East.
What? We're gonna win like 2 games next year. Watch, and the Pistons are gonna win 1.
You think that they're going to win that many? I mean, look, they got the number 1 pick once. They drafted Cade Cunningham, a really good player, and they've surrounded him with nothing. Is it even tanking at this point? It's just organizational malpractice.
They're gonna go 0-82 and still get like the 6th pick.
Yeah, I could see that.
You can't stop them.
All right, we got to move on to hockey though. The couple of exciting game 7s, Bruins Maple Leafs, Charlie.
Toronto, it happened
Maple
again.
Leafs in the game 7. I think I don't even need to tell you who won because you already know because it was the Maple Leafs in the game 7. It happened in overtime again. In fact, I believe that this is the 3rd straight time that the Maple Leafs have played a game 7 against Boston in the Stanley Cup playoffs and lost after holding a lead in the 3rd period. It's bad.
It's awful, and I feel so bad for them. Not only did they lose, but it's Boston. The Bruins have like the worst fans of any franchise in major North American sports.
Yeah, now the Bruins now have a chance to avenge their series loss last year to the Panthers, and so far it's not going great. They're down 3-1.
Not going very well at all.
Losing game 3 and game 4 in Boston. It's been brutal. Also been brutal for the Carolina Hurricanes, who were down 3-0. Now, I would say though, watch out because they're back in the series. They get a game 6 now at home. It feels like it is possible, probable no, but possible that they could overcome a 3-0 deficit. It would be pretty historic, but it's not off the table. Now, Dallas, they also needed the game 7 to get by the Golden Knights in a rematch of last year's Western Conference Finals. They're now in a battle against the Colorado Avalanche, and it's going pretty well.
Speaking of the Avalanche.
Oh no, yes. Yeah, we got to go there, don't we?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And you're the pronunciation guy, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, Valerie Nichu's skin. I have no clue if I said that right.
Close enough.
But
It doesn't
I don't
really
think that
matter
you can.
because he's a horrible person, but
Yeah, he's suspended at least 6 months in the player assistance program. It's the same guy that last year had the issues in the playoffs in Seattle, where there's an intoxicated woman found in sleeping in his room in the hotel. Yeah, now into this the player assistance program. He definitely needs help, Charlie.
yeah, he really does. I mean, this is the second incident, and you got to wonder, is this going to happen again?
I
But
mean,
yeah,
you'd hope that the program works, and then yeah, I guess we'll move on though to the final series in the West, which is the Canucks Oilers, the Battle of Canada, which means that a Canadian team will appear in the Western Conference Finals. That much is known, and so far it's looking like it's probably going to be Vancouver. They're up 2-1, but Charlie, this has been a good series, though. You did, I imagine, you saw the incident at the end of Game 3 with Connor McDavid just getting shoved to the ground.
I did, and that was a. I don't really know what happened there.
Yeah, so here's the thing. This wouldn't happen in any other sport. I mean,
No,
leagues
no,
set precedents
this is
that
a
you do
purely
something like
hockey
this.
thing.
Yeah, league set precedents that if you do something like this, you're getting suspended for a long time. But the NHL doesn't, right? They could do something about it, but they have no interest in doing anything because this is where half of their ratings come from. And let me just say though, if you're watching hockey for that, that's not what
Just,
hockey's about,
just
or at least
watch
it's not what hockey's
boxing.
supposed to be about.
Literally, just
Yeah,
watch
exactly.
boxing.
Exactly. All
I
right.
mean, to
Moving
be fair,
on.
it probably is cheaper to watch hockey than pay per view, but
Sure. Yeah, moving on. Although basic cable is not cheap, and that's still where most of the hockey, at least playoff
oh,
hockey,
speaking of which,
airs. But
I don't remember who exactly it was, but I saw someone who did the calculations and determined that to watch every NFL game this season, it's going to cost you like $875.
it's a lot because right, here's the thing, because it seems like Netflix is going to get the Christmas games. We'll know more. We'll talk about it more in the schedule when the schedule's out. So that'll be next week's episode.
So
But
does that
it's
mean that we will always have them? Well, it may not be a Nickelodeon, but we will always remember that's not what he meant to cook.
yeah, I imagine we still get a Nickelodeon game at some point during the season. But so you're gonna have to get Netflix. There's a Peacock game. Amazon, obviously, for Thursday nights. ESPN Plus, they have an international game every year. Uh, just basic cable to watch Monday Night Football, and then Sunday Ticket to see all the regional games on Sunday afternoons. So it's no, it's quite a price. But moving up on to soccer, the UEFA Champions League, the semifinals, Charlie, were really good, and Dortmund actually taken down PSG 2-0 on aggregate, but then in that Real Madrid Bayern Munich game, oh my, the second leg, Munich was up 1-0 in what? It was like the 80 something minute.
Something like that.
Real Madrid, the same guy scores twice in like the span of 2 or 3 minutes, right after being subbed on, completely turns that game, and that semifinal just completely flips it over, and it'll be Real Madrid once again playing for another Champions League victory against Dortmund, and I got to think that they could win that.
Now let's move on now to the Formula One Miami Grand Prix.
Uh-oh.
It finally happened. He didn't win. He got outpaced by someone.
No one's
Lando
said the
Norris.
Trump person won.
Yep, I told you last Grand Prix that Norris was one podium away from having the most podiums without a race win. He was on the podium last weekend, but he was on the top step of the podium. He gets his first win in Miami after Magnussen and Sargent collide. A safety car comes out, catches Verstappen out after he hit actually one of the bollards from one of the chicanes, gave him a little bit of wing damage, and apparently, according to Red Bull, a bit of floor damage. And Norris just outran him and just held the lead to the end of the race and won the race. It was a sprint weekend. Kevin Magnussen managed to get 50-something seconds worth of penalties and is now 2 penalty points away from being banned from a race. So I don't know
Wow.
what's gotten into him, but that's a fun story from this weekend. Anyway, Colin, see, I told you, there is competitiveness in Formula One sometimes. It just takes a little bit of chaos.
Sure. Also competitiveness in the Kentucky Derby, which was last weekend. Mystic Dan winning that, and Charlie, a photo finish between 3 horses, a really incredible 2 minutes of racing. When we'll see what happens in the rest of the Triple Crown. And if you can't tell that I have no interest in horse racing, and just wanted to get that out of the way. Well, now you've heard it from me directly.
Well,
Moving on.
Colin, that was not the only incredibly close finish of the weekend. The NASCAR race at Kansas Speedway had the closest finish in NASCAR history, with Kyle Larson beating out Chris Buescher by 1/10,000th of a second. The closest
Wow.
finish ever. In fact, most people thought that Buescher had won the race, and this weekend Buescher gets caught out again and comes 3 laps, essentially 6 laps away, and 13 inches from winning back-to-back races. He was not happy with that. Nearly got into an altercation with Tyler Reddick in the pit lane after the race. But we'll see. It's the All-Star race in North Wilkesboro next weekend, as North Wilkesboro returns yet again after being on a long hiatus. Was back last year, comes back again this year after being gone from the schedule since the late 90s.
And NASCAR also adding an in-season tournament starting next year. But
yes, we'll get
suck
to
baseball,
that
we haven't
when
done
that
that in a
happens.
while.
That's a horrible idea, but we'll get into that at a later point. Real quick, as we move on to baseball, we do have a real quick Mariners trade per Jeff Passan on Twitter. The Cubs have traded for Tyson Miller, for a right-handed reliever for the Mariners, for infielder Jake Slaughter.
I mean, I know Tyson Miller. Mariners just DFA'd him. I have no idea who Jake Slaughter is, so I guess I'll look into that. Looking forward, but that's not the trade news I thought you were going to talk about, because Luis Arraez traded from the Marlins recently and to the Padres. Padres get a big addition, but Charlie, I think we start just our recap of MLB from recently. In that National League East, the Marlins are about to enter another rebuild from their failed rebuild, which stemmed from another failed rebuild. And what's going on in Miami?
Real quick, Colin, minus the weird 2020 shenanigans, the Marlins have made the playoffs twice, ever. And they won the World Series both times, except for last year, I realized. They did make the playoffs last year.
Yeah, they did make the playoffs at the end of last year. First time making the playoffs.
They made the playoffs three times. They won 2 World Series and then got swept in the third time. They are a strange team.
Yes, they are. But let's see. What else in that division, Charlie? So far, we actually have a good battle at the top. The Mets are Nationals, But
the Mets are the Mets.
Yeah, the Phillies and the Braves, it's a good battle, especially if AJ Minter keeps, blowing games.
Yeah, he did it against Seattle, and he did it against Brendan Nimmo on Mother's Day. In fact, actually, my family was watching this game on TV, and my parents suggested that we switch over to the dog show instead of watching the end of that game. And I said we should have kept it on the game, and you didn't believe me. Missed out on seeing that live, but well. But Braves fans, like, you got to imagine. Do you want to leave Minter in New York?
I think they want to leave Minter just about anywhere.
That's not Atlanta.
Exactly. Yeah. Look at the NL Central, Charlie. This is actually also another good battle near the top. The Brewers and the Cubs. I mean, these are a couple teams we thought would be in it, but the Pirates have faded. Though Paul Skeens has debuted, that's a fun one. And the Reds are the Reds, and the Cardinals are, well, I don't know what's happening, but Paul Goldschmidt seems toast.
See, Colin, the thing that I think is surprising to me is if you look at almost every single division, there's 2 teams out front, and then everybody else.
Yeah.
It seems very consistent. Speaking of which, in the NL West, this is a not super good example. The Dodgers are being the Dodgers, the super team we thought they would be. San Diego's hovering around 500. The Arizona Diamondbacks are okay. The Giants are pretty bad, and the Rockies are the Rockies. Yep. Enough said about that. Now let's move on to. Am I reading this wrong? Or are 4 of the 5 teams in the AL Central above 500?
I mean, look, here's the thing,
though. That's not supposed to happen.
No, but they've all played the White Sox so many times. Like, Charlie, the Twins had a 12-game winning streak. 10 of those 12 wins were against the White Sox and the Angels, which we'll get to the Angels in a minute.
We'll get to the Angels.
But the Central is...
Where did KC come from?
Kansas City has been a surprise,
not real, is it?
Actually.
That they're not going to be able to keep doing that, right?
Well, I mean, Bobby Witt has had a phenomenal start to the year. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up the winning pace that they're on right now. I mean, they're winning almost 60% of their games, but, I mean... I don't think that they're going to stick around for the playoff race either, but I mean, 500 is possible for them, I think, this year.
And in the East, their schedule does not favor them either. They got Oakland,
that's-
Detroit, Tampa, Minnesota, San Diego, Cleveland, and then Seattle again, and then the Yankees, and then the Dodgers. So not a fun month for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, in the East, the Orioles and the Yankees right up at the top, and everyone else really hovering up right around 500. It's been tough for the Blue Jays. Alek Manoah has looked not great since coming back, including giving up another home run to Carlos Santana. Shocker on that one, really, truly
And then
shocked.
Boston and
But,
Tampa hovering around 500, and the Blue Jays are
yeah,
mid. Let's get to the
very,
West.
very good.
Houston, what happened?
They've looked better as of late, like significantly.
Yeah, they crushed the A's today, but I mean it's the A's. It's not that hard. But also, this
The
is
A's
not
have been
good.
a pleasant surprise, though.
The A's have been a surprise. They really have. But elsewhere in the division, the Angels are awful. You said that you thought the Angels were going to be the worst team in that division, and so far you are right.
And I'm not going back on it. They are awful. They're really, really bad.
Oh, by the way,
I mean,
speaking of which, I wanted
Go
to add
for
this real quick because I think it's funny. Both the Marlins and the White Sox are already at negative 90 run differential.
that's hard to do.
We are
The-
40 games into the season. How are you this bad?
it's hard. No, the Angels though, they have just it's been like they had a ticket issue. One scanner was working at their stadium.
Oh,
And so most fans couldn't get in till like the fourth inning a few nights ago.
oh,
And
that's
they were
awful.
down like 4-0 by the time that happened. By the time most fans got in.
Did Mike Trout hit a home run?
No, Mike Trout's on the injured list, and you'll never guess who else is on the injured list.
I forgot about that. Yeah, he's gone. He's done for a while.
Yeah, and so is Rendon, because of course he is. This is what happens every year. This is why I always predict that the Angels will be terrible, because the rule with the Angels, something will always go wrong.
Are they
Every year. This is why they ruined Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani's careers.
If you put those two on any team that isn't the Angels, okay, maybe the Mariners, but like, how do you miss the playoffs that many times with that core?
You don't. I mean, well, you shouldn't. I mean, Ohtani's finally going to get to play in the playoffs, it looks like.
They're the New York Jets of the NFL, of the MLB.
Well, except the New York Jets actually have fewer stars than the Angels have had pass through there the last few years. Also, can't wait for Anthony Rendon to play really well on a contract year in a couple of years, but still no one will pick him up because he's garbage.
So go to Chicago.
But they do have a thing for garbage in Chicago, don't they? Sorry, on the at Guaranteed Rate Field. The Cubs actually know what they're doing.
Let's get back to the AL West. Texas and Seattle out front. Seattle currently ahead of Kansas City in the top of the ninth, 6-2. Barring disaster, the Mariners look like they're going to take that one. And Texas got stomped by Cleveland today. Cleveland is a big surprise. They have come out of nowhere. I think they're following the traditional Cleveland cycle of great, mid, just over and over again. It's a sine wave.
Yeah. All right. I think that's going to cap off this episode of CNC Talks, unless you have any other comments quickly, Charlie.
I do not, but I am noticing that Dallas and OKC are down to the wire.
All right. Well, we're going to go watch the end of that game as soon as we do this intro. So
please, Dallas.
Yeah, make sure to subscribe to the CNC Talks podcast. Thanks so much for listening as well. Episodes coming out every single week wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, cctalks.com, has everything you need to know about this show, and you can call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And follow us on Twitter at cctalkspodcast, and follow Charlie at cctalkscharlie, and join our Discord server at cctalks.com/Discord. All of this information and more is in the description below. But for now, for our producer Morris and our production designer Zach, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie, and I think Thunder just won the game.